What's up, YouTube? So this week, Garrison updated his Simic Ooze deck, but he let Brett play it because he wanted to play some jank combo deck. So, we're going to have Brett talk about it. First thing we're going to do is go over the deck list. So, we've got creatures on the top here, and then we've got some spells, and some lands. So, starting with the creatures, we've got 3 Paradise Druids and 3 Incubation Druids. Those are just basically functioning as ramp. What do you think about those cards, Brett?
I think that this card was bad and this card was very good.
Okay.
In my experience.
So would you swap another druid for the Paradise? Another druid for another druid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you keep the other 2 in?
I didn't like this. The only real good effect it had is once you could adapt it, it helped you use the biogenetic Ooze's ability, which we'll talk about later.
All right. So then we have 4 Frilled Mystics, which if you ever played with Mystic Snake, having a creature that's a counterspell just feels really good.
Yeah, I won a couple of matches where that was basically the only spell I cast. I just hit somebody.
Beat them for 3
7 times.
Yeah.
And did nothing else.
Yep. Then we've got 4 Biogenic Ooze.
Good card. This is the whole point of this deck.
Yep.
Garrison is in love with this card. It's pretty good.
3 Hydroid Crassus. How many times did you cast that tonight?
Probably like 4 or 5 times, but it was never very good.
So would you cut this?
I don't know. I think it's necessary for some of like the rougher matchups, like the aggro decks, which I also think having more Paradise Druids would help in those matchups.
Because it blocks and trades.
It trades with their aggressive creatures. Which
I guess against like mono red, they can't burn it to kill it.
Right, so they can't just trade a shock for its life.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to trade off with one of their creatures. It does die to Chain Whirler though, so that's kind of like.
I guess I haven't seen a whole lot of mono red here.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of it here, so it's probably fine.
Then we have 1 Zagana Utopian Speaker.
Actually, MVP of this deck. It's just overrun.
Yeah. Everything that has counters gets trample and it cantrips, so it replaces itself.
It's cheaper than the actual overrun and it cantrips. So, like, I mean, I adapted it once, but that game was already over.
Oh, come on. That was the game against me.
It was against Matt.
All right, then we're moving on to the spells. We've got 4 Wizard's Retorts. Synergizes with the Frilled Mystic.
Cute combo.
Zagana's also a wizard. Garrison's over here if you saw his hand.
Kind of wish that there was more wizards. Or
we aren't on the sideboard yet, Garrison. Okay, and then we've got 4 Wilderness Reclamation.
An alternative, though, if
we're still on
we can't. Well, yeah, I just want to say is like the Narset's Reversal or whatever would be interesting in this deck, and then that's always blue for the counter.
Isn't that just Remand?
Kind of, but you cast the spell. So they get it back. Like, it's not perfect, but there were times where I had blue up, but I didn't have 1 blue up, and there was no Frilled Mystic in play. So.
But isn't it instant or sorcery only?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
That sounds accurate.
So Brett here hasn't played Magic in like a year.
Yeah, I haven't played in a year. I don't know.
So I don't think that that's a good swap.
Yeah, that's not a good swap. Don't do that.
But you could use, I don't know, Thought Collapse or something if you were milling. Or
like Syncopate would be pretty good in this deck.
Syncopate could be good. The reason I like Thought Collapse right now is because the new gods are really problematic. You just can't get rid of them. So if you were to kill the god and then Thought Collapse and mill it into their graveyard, they wouldn't get it back. So I do like that aspect. But we're going to move on now. So Wilderness Reclamation, there's 4.
Best card in Standard.
Yeah, obviously a broken card. Do lots of things with lots of mana.
I feel like they didn't playtest this card at all.
I don't think they did. I'm pretty sure it was just like Jace the Mind Sculptor 2.0.
They just found some other templated card that was like untap on everybody's upkeep, and they're like, why not do it on your own turn? They're like, oh, stack. Oh, yeah. Float mana doesn't empty until end of... Oh no, what have we done?
Yep. So then we've got 2 Awakening of Vitu-Ghazi. I think this was your favorite card in the deck.
Yeah, this is probably the best card in the deck. I want at least a 3rd copy. Maybe a 4th, but it might be greedy.
Yeah, with 4 Oozes.
Yeah.
That might be greedy. But it is a legendary creature.
Yeah,
we found that out at the pre-release when Ray played a second one.
Oh. Whoops.
But yeah, it's an instant speed 9/9 for 5 mana, so it's not bad.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, it doesn't have trample, but like sometimes you just counter 3 spells and then cast a 5 or a 9/9 and they lose the game. Because it's a pretty fast clock.
Then we got 3 Growth Spirals.
Very weird that there's not 4, but it didn't seem that bad that there was only 3.
I guess you could cut an Incubation Druid if you really don't like that card.
Yeah, so like so far my cuts would probably be for like...
Yeah,
one for each of those.
Yeah, and one incubation druid is probably.
I do
not
like
bad.
that Garrison was trying out all of these, so like 3 copies of each is probably better than 4 copies of the wrong card.
Yeah. And then we've got 2 Vivian, Champion of the Wilds.
Pretty cool. The instant cast stuff with Krasis was neat. That creatures
on your
have
end
flash,
step.
yeah. So you could get a really big Krasis, gain a bunch of life, which came up once, but I ended up losing that game anyways.
How?
I
don't wanna know.
They were playing Aristocrats, so they just basically burned me.
Gotcha. Also, just nice to -2 her a couple of times and
Yeah.
hopefully find 2 creatures, which I think she whiffed quite a bit for you tonight, didn't she?
She did a lot. It was actually kind of infuriating, but I also got 2 biogenic oozes against Garrison in round 3, so that was pretty sick.
I guess if you're running the one more growth spiral, it does lower your creature count, which kind of works against Vivian.
That is true.
So what do we have? We have 6, 10, 14, 17, 18. So if she's looking at 3 cards, you really need 20 creatures, I think, to average out that you won't miss. And if you go down even lower, you maybe even cut
That's true.
some number of Vivians. I don't know if that's right or not. I'm just speculating.
I want to say, like, you're kind of just fine having your creatures have flash for 3 mana in this deck, too.
Yeah, that's probably... I guess even if you whiff, you...
Like, end step Ooze is kind of weird because you want to get his EOT trigger.
Right.
So you don't really want to
And
cast him with
you're
flash.
definitely not casting that
Well, it's
for
already
no
has
reason,
flash,
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it's really just for Crassus. So if you're cutting Crassus, then I guess it is card draw. But if you're drawing Paradise Druids and Incubation Druids, you don't really care that much.
Yeah, perhaps the Vivian isn't as good as I originally thought it was. It was really good at, like, getting counterspelled, which was, like, the main thing I was doing with it was...
Bait out a counterspell.
Yeah, just play it on 3, and then a lot of the times people just felt obligated to counter it because of the card advantage.
Yep. All right, so then we've got 2 Nissa who shakes the world.
This is really interesting in board stalls. I did get the ultimate once, but it
Again, that was against me.
against Matt, and it probably didn't matter. Like, I think if I was just making more 3/3s, I would have won the game as well.
The funny part about that game was you pull out all the forests and then you drew an island the next
Yeah, I
turn.
drew an island, yeah. So I do like having both of these out at the same time, though, because of how they synergize. So with the Krasis especially. So your forests all tap for double.
Yeah.
They're just mana flared, so that's pretty sweet.
And then we'll quickly go over the lands because you don't have to say too much about them. We've got 4 hinterland harbors, 4 breeding pools. We've got 1 Karn's Bastion, which is obviously there just to proliferate all the counters that you'd have on the Oozes and the Crassus.
And make a 10/10.
And I guess, and 10/10 and the Planeswalkers. 2 Memorial to Genius, which outside of Crassus and Vivian, I guess Growth Spiral is a cantrip. It's the only source of card draw.
I kind of would have liked a 3rd, I think, instead of one of the 5th island, 6th island.
Okay. And then
I think
we've
a 3rd
got
one would have been nice.
8 forests and 6 islands. And then we'll go to the sideboard. So we've got 3 Crawl Harpooners, 2...
Against Matt, this killed Lyra Dawnbringer.
It did, because...
Because you wrapped away the rest of my creatures.
Quickly go over how First Strike doesn't work in combat, or in fight. It works in combat, but in fight, they just both deal damage at the same time, because of how the fight mechanic is worded. You do gain life, but you don't have First Strike in that instance. Then we have 2 Mesmerizing Benthids.
Best card in the sideboard, I think.
What did you put that in against?
The aggro decks I played, it just stalls the board.
Just a bunch of blockers.
Yeah, a 4/5 is just, like, unkillable, and then the fact that you also can block any smaller creatures they have with your O2s that freeze them for a turn, it's just...
It
bad
slows the
matchups,
game down
I
enough.
think aggressive decks are very bad matchups for this particular build, and that was a very good stabilizing card. I still lost every time I cast it, but that was just because I didn't draw anything to follow up with it.
Gotcha. And then obviously with the Crawl Harpooners, you're putting that in against Lyra, against Thief of Sanity.
Mono blue decks, if they're around.
Yeah, I haven't seen anyone playing that lately.
It's kind of been hated out, I think.
Yeah.
Also, the land.
Yeah, Niv Mizzet, though, that's true. And then we've got Vivian's Arcbow, just a one-of. Did you play that at all tonight?
No, I didn't, but that's because I read it wrong. So.
Oh, okay.
I thought you discarded a card and looked at the top X and put one in your hand.
It's just
yeah,
tutor.
it casts the creature.
Oh, and it's tutor, right? Or is
Well,
it?
yeah, it doesn't even cast it, so it's uncounterable.
Oh, it
just
is
puts it into play.
X cards. Okay.
Top X, put a creature into play.
So you put that in against control, sneak it into play.
Right.
Hopefully
Which I didn't do, which I wish I would have.
Yeah. And then hopefully they don't have an artifact removal spell. And then we got 3 negates, whoops, which is obviously for the control matchup.
Yeah, it counters a non-creature spell.
Really?
And I put it in for decks that I expect to play a lot of non-creature spells. Like the Wilderness Reclamation Mirror I
Very
played.
insightful. Then we've got 1 Mystic Archaeologist.
Sweet card, put it in once, didn't get to play it. Very excited by its ability with untapping all of my lands.
Yeah, draw some cards, untap, draw some cards. And then we have 2 Palaka Worms.
Would have been nice to draw after my Mesmerizing Benthids.
Mm-hmm.
Did not. So they kind of, these 4 are kind of in the same matchups you board them in.
You put the Palaka Worm in against aggro?
Yeah, usually.
Okay.
I'm usually just trying to trade off all of the dorks. When I'm on the
Eventually
draw,
get to 7.
I was cutting Wilderness Reclamation against the aggro decks because I'm not going to have time to play a Haymaker.
Yeah.
I just want to get things onto the board to stop them from murdering me. So once you stabilize something like this, if you can gain 7, that's usually just a wrap.
Enough, yeah. And then we've got 2 Crushing Canopies.
Wilderness
Lyra.
Reclamation, Lyra,
Niv Mizzet, kind of.
Mizzet. Sure.
Oh, Search
for
Riscanta.
Riscanta. Search!
Search.
It's for Search! I didn't play against the Search, so I didn't think of it.
And then,
It happens to kill enchantments and flying creatures.
okay, and it's a modal spell, so you get to choose one.
That's right.
And then we've got 1 Root Snare that he wanted to actually just like take it off camera and not show you guys that it was in the deck because he was embarrassed by it.
Yeah, I asked Garrison to make me a deck on Wednesday because I haven't played Magic in a long time, but I've been playing a lot of Arena. And he was like, okay. And then he grabbed his old sideboard from this deck before War of the Spark came out, and it used to have 2 Root Snares in the main deck, and there's only 1 Root Snare in the sideboard. So this is, it could have been a forest, and it would have been just perfectly fine because I can't imagine a scenario where you board in a single fog.
Against aggro, I guess.
Yeah, and then you hope to draw your 1 fog in the pivotal turn.
Yeah. Makes sense. So, anyways, changes that we might make going forward. You said
I was not a fan of Incubation Druid.
put one of those there, one of those there.
One of the cards I would really like to experiment with in this deck is the 1 in a green. Look at the top 3, put a permanent in your hand, gain 3 life.
Yes, the Bond of something or other.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that card. I haven't seen it played yet, but it gives
So having a way to gain some life in the main deck would be nice against the aggressive matchups, besides Krasis, because it doesn't really gain that much.
No, you
You
have
need
to
8
really.
mana to gain 3 life, so
Yeah,
not great. But
and then you kind of wanted a 3rd Awakening.
yeah, I would have liked that just because of the tap out threat.
So if we're
from my
starting to cut
Awakening
Crassus, maybe we do that.
Yeah, you could do like that, and then even still run this 3 and 3 split, and then cut these 3 for like the
The bond of renewal or something.
That sounds right. Bond of Renewal.
I don't remember.
That green spell.
The
1
green
in a
spell.
Gain 3 life.
We're gonna look it up here. Garrison's got his phone out. Moving on. Any cuts you would make to the sideboard and swap?
Well, I mean the root snare, yeah, but I thought actually this is a pretty well put together sideboard. I thought Garrison was very thoughtful. This made more sense when he had more root snares in the 75.
Bond of Flourishing.
Bond
is
of
the- is the
Flourishing
spell.
is the card that I would look at.
So maybe 3 Bond of Flourishing here.
Yeah.
And
Which
then I think
it makes
Vivian
Vivian
loses.
weird, yeah.
I think she loses a lot of value if you go below. Really, I think you want 20 creatures.
See, the problem is like this is clearly a Nexus of Fate deck, but we're not playing Nexus of Fate on purpose.
Yeah.
So before there's like 1,000.
because YouTube hates it.
Yes. Well, why isn't there a Nexus of you playing Wilderness? We did that on purpose. We didn't
Yeah.
want to have that kind of a deck at the store because newer players don't like playing against it.
And veteran players don't like playing against it.
Some veteran players like playing it though, and
Playing it is fine.
Yeah.
Playing against it is not fun.
Yeah, playing against it is not very fun. Playing in the mirror is hilarious and also not very fun.
Nope. So I guess if you were now, let's not even speculate on what you would change to make it a Nexus deck. So it's just Bond of Flourishing, and maybe change one of these to the Awakening. And what would you put in the 15th sideboard slot? What did you have? You had problems against aggro.
Aggro was the hardest thing. So
Something to block with, gain life.
yeah, if
Another
there's
Bond
another
of Flourishing.
card to gain life, that seems strange.
I
Even
mean-
even this is actually pretty good against aggro decks if you just like lower your curve and just put in more creatures.
Yeah.
So you could even play a second Mystic Archaeologist.
I think at that point I'd rather
it's-
play Crawl Harpooner as a 4th.
yeah, as a 3/2 that.
If you're intending to trade with something, I'd rather have the 3 power
That's
and the
fair.
fight ability because you can do it
So yeah, probably just a
proactively.
4th Corral Harpooner would be a good card. Or just another way to actually gain life that I'm not really
Can't think
thinking
of.
off the top
Gift
of my
of
head.
Paradise. I don't know if you really want
Seems
that.
weird.
So that's the deck. That's the changes we'd
You
make.
could do Gift of Paradise over the Growth Spirals, though, with the...
I like the cantrip,
Well, yeah, that's true.
because you don't really have too many ways of drawing cards.
Sure.
And then, I guess if you lower the creatures, what do you replace a Vivian with? I think one Vivian's still good, though.
Probably just your 4th Paradise Druid.
Cool. All right, well, thanks for watching, YouTube.